The Great Hall on Nexus Prime had never seen anything like this. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the vast crystal dome that arched high into the purple sky. Some floated in the air like glowing orbs of light. Others crawled along the walls with dozens of legs, their forms shifting with each movement. A few resembled walking stones, ancient and silent, while others appeared to be forged entirely from metal and circuitry, their limbs whirring with mechanical precision. This was the largest gathering the Galactic Council had held in 1,000 years. Representatives from 847 different worlds had come to answer one simple question. Should humans be allowed to join their alliance? At the center of the Great Dome stood Ambassador Thari, a towering insectoid being 12 feet tall, with 4 arms and eyes capable of perceiving 7 spectrums of light. Thari had served as a diplomat for over 3 centuries and had witnessed countless species apply for council membership. Most had been rejected, but none had been as young, as reckless, or as foolish as the humans of Earth. Fellow council members, Thari began, their voice echoing through the dome in a dozen different languages. Today we discuss the humans of Earth. They have sent us this. The ambassador raised a small data crystal into the air. The device looked insignificant in the vast hall, but every being present knew what it contained. Humanity's hopes, dreams, and plea for inclusion. Let us review what we know about these humans, Thari said, making the word sound like an insult. They are only 200,000 years old. In galactic terms, they were born yesterday. A wave of laughter rolled through the chamber. The ethereal collective, beings of pure energy, flickered with amusement. The crystal singers of Tau emitted musical notes that sounded like giggling. Even the ancient world mind of Kepler 442b, a planetary-scale computer, rumbled with mechanical laughter. They have been in space for less than a century, Thari continued. They have visited only 12 star systems. They still wage wars among themselves on their home world. They cannot even agree on one government for their own planet. More laughter filled the hall. Some of the younger species looked confused. How could any race be so primitive and still believe they belonged in the council? But wait, Thari said, raising one of their forearms. It gets better. These humans have done something no other species has ever dared. They have refused to share their technology with us. The laughter stopped. This was no longer funny. It was shocking. When we made first contact with them 10 years ago, Thari explained, we offered them the gift of knowledge. We showed them how to build better star drives. We offered to teach them about energy weapons and shield technology. We even offered to help them end their wars and achieve world peace. The ambassador paused, letting the silence build. And they said no. A roar of angry voices erupted. Species that had never agreed on anything were now united in their outrage. The war leaders of the hegemony clicked their claws in fury. The merchants of the Trade Confederation buzzed with disbelief. How could anyone refuse such gifts? One cried. Not only did they refuse our help, Thari continued, but they have created what they call exclusion zones around their colonies. They claim these areas belong to them alone. They have warned our ships to stay away. The hall erupted in chaos. Beings that communicated through color changes flashed angry reds and purples. Those who spoke in musical tones created a harsh symphony of rage. The mechanical races sent streams of furious data to one another. The humans, Thari shouted over the noise, believe they can survive alone in the galaxy. They think they do not need our wisdom or our friendship. They think they're special. The crystal singers began to hum a low, dangerous note. The ethereal collective grew brighter with fury. Even the peaceful aquatic minds of Oceania sent ripples of displeasure through their water tanks. Let me read you some of their other crimes, Thari said, pulling out a longer list. They have militarized their first contact protocols. When they meet a new species, their first question is always, are you a threat? Not, can we be friends? Not, what can we learn from each other? They assume every new race might be an enemy. The peaceful alliance of VGA shook their flower-like heads in dismay. The Unity Collective, who had never fought a war in their million-year history, sent waves of sadness through their shared mind. They have also refused to join our economic system, Thari went on. The Trade Confederation offered them membership in the Galactic Commerce Network. They could have traded freely with thousands of worlds. Instead, they created their own currency and trade only among themselves. The merchants in the hall made unhappy noises. The Trade Confederation had made every species rich through shared commerce. How could the humans be so foolish? And finally, Thari said, saving the best for last, they have classified most of their technology as military secrets. They will not tell us how their ships work. They will not share their weapon designs. They act as if we might steal from them or attack them. This brought the loudest laugh yet. The idea that any species might need to hide its secrets from the Council was absurd. The Council protected everyone. The Council brought peace and wisdom to the galaxy. The Council had ended wars and created prosperity for millions of worlds. So, Thari concluded, should we welcome these paranoid, primitive, selfish humans into our great alliance? Should we give them a voice in the Council that has kept peace for 10,000 years? The vote was swift and unanimous. Not a single species voted to accept humanity. But that was not enough for some. I propose we do more than just reject them, called out General Corax of the hegemony. The massive warrior resembled a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros, his body plated with natural armor. These humans are dangerous. They are too aggressive and too secretive. I propose we classify them as a species of concern. Excited whispers spread through the hall. A species of concern classification was rare and serious. It meant the Council considered that species a potential threat to galactic peace. I support this idea, sang the lead crystal singer. Their refusal to cooperate shows they may become hostile in the future. Agreed, buzzed a Trade Confederation representative. Species that will not join our economic system often turn to piracy and theft. The vote on the new classification was even faster than the first. 847 species voted yes. 0 voted no. But the Council was not finished with humanity yet. They decided to add a special punishment to teach the humans a lesson about respect. I propose a trade embargo, announced the ethereal collective speaker. No Council species should share any technology with humans. No cultural exchanges. No economic cooperation. Let them learn what isolation really means. And territorial restrictions, added the world mind. They want exclusion zones? Give them one big exclusion zone. Confine them to their home system and their 12 colonies. No expansion beyond that. How long should this punishment last? Asked a small voice from the back of the hall. Thari's eyes gleamed with cruel satisfaction. Until they come crawling back to us, begging for membership. Until they learn to show proper respect for their betters. The final vote was unanimous. Once again, humanity would be cut off from galactic civilization. No trade, no technology sharing. No diplomatic contact except for official matters. They would be left alone in their small corner of the galaxy to think about their mistakes. As the Council session ended, many species began placing bets on how long it would take. The Crystal Singers wagered 50 years before humanity destroyed itself in war. The Trade Confederation bet on economic collapse within 20 years. The hegemony thought the humans would surrender and beg for membership within 10. They are so young and so foolish, Thari said to their aide as they left the Great Hall. This will teach them the value of humility. None of them suspected that they had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. None of them imagined that their laughter would one day turn to screams. They thought they were punishing a primitive species that needed to learn its place. They were wrong. Some of the more curious species occasionally sent long-range sensors toward human space. But the results were always disappointing. A few mining operations on asteroids. Some orbital habitats around their colonies. Nothing impressive. Nothing that suggested growth or advancement. They are stagnating, the scientists reported. Exactly what we expected from a species cut off from galactic civilization. The Crystal Singers, whose territory bordered human space, sometimes detected odd signals from the region. Strange pulses of energy that did not match any known technology. Radio transmissions in languages that seemed to evolve faster than any normal language should. But these reports were filed away and forgotten by busy Council bureaucrats who had more important things to worry about. What the Council did not know was that humanity had been very busy during those 50 years of silence. Captain Velarov of the merchant ship Prophet's Dream was having a typical day in space when everything changed. The six-armed Nexan had been flying cargo routes for 40 years, and thought he had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. Today, he was carrying grain from the agricultural worlds of Deer to the industrial planets of the Forge Coalition. A simple run through empty space that should have been boring and profitable. His ship dropped out of hyperspace in what his charts showed as an empty system, 300 light-years from the nearest human colony. According to the Galactic database, the system contained nothing but a dead star and some worthless rock planets. It was a perfect place to stop and recalibrate his navigation systems. But when Velarov's sensors came online, they showed something impossible. There was a city in space. Not a space station. Not an orbital platform. An actual city. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers in all directions. A massive structure that seemed to grow and shift as he watched. The architecture was unlike anything in the Galactic database. Geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Materials that bent light around them. Energy signatures that made his ship's computer stutter and crash. This cannot be real, Velarov whispered to himself. But his sensors insisted it was there. He tried to access the Galactic database to identify the structure, but his computer could not match it to any known technology. The energy readings were impossible. The size was incredible, and most disturbing of all, it was clearly inhabited. Thousands of smaller craft moved around the massive city like insects around a hive. But these were not normal ships. They moved in ways that defied physics, sharp turns at speeds that should have torn them apart. Some seemed to phase in and out of visible space, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Velarov reached for his communication controls to report this discovery to the Trade Confederation. But before he could send a message, his ship shuddered. Something had grabbed it. Not a tractor beam like those used by normal spacecraft, but something else. Something that reached through his shields as if they were not there and held his ship with invisible hands. Unknown vessel. Velarov tried to broadcast. This is Captain Velarov of the merchant ship Prophet's Dream. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. There was no response. His ship was being pulled toward the massive city, toward docking bays that seemed to reshape themselves to accommodate his vessel. Velarov tried to fire his engines to escape, but they would not respond. His ship's systems were being controlled by something external, something that understood his technology better than he did. As his ship was drawn closer, Velarov could see details that made his blood freeze. The structure was not built in any conventional sense. It looked grown like something alive. Parts of it pulsed with organic rhythms. Other sections seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, stretching away into spaces his eyes could not follow. And everywhere, he saw symbols and writing in a language he almost recognized. It looked familiar but wrong, like something he should know, but didn't quite remember. Just before his ship disappeared into the docking bay, Velarov managed to send a single desperate transmission on the emergency frequency. Found something. Humans. Not what we thought. Send help. Then his ship was swallowed by the city, and the transmission cut to static. Similar incidents began occurring across the galaxy's rim. Merchant ships disappeared without a trace. Survey vessels sent routine reports and then went silent. Long-range exploration teams failed to return from their missions. At first, the incidents were dismissed as normal space hazards, pirates, mechanical failures, or natural phenomena. But as the reports multiplied, patterns began to emerge. All the missing ships had been in sectors near the edges of known space. All had been traveling through regions marked as empty on galactic charts. And the few survivors who managed to escape told stories that made no sense. They spoke of cities that existed in folded space, visible from one angle, but not from another. Ships that moved through dimensions that should not exist. And strangest of all, they spoke of humans who no longer looked entirely human. Their proportions were wrong, reported Commander Thrax of the survey ship Deep Seeker, one of the few who had escaped. Too tall, too graceful, too perfect. And their eyes were too bright, too knowing. When they looked at me, I felt like they could see through my soul. They did not speak, added Navigator Quinn from the same ship. But I heard their voices in my mind. They asked me questions about the Council, about the trade routes, about our military capabilities. I tried not to answer, but the thoughts came anyway. The reports were filed and forgotten by most officials, dismissed as the ravings of traumatized survivors. But a few analysts began to notice disturbing patterns. Long-range sensors were detecting massive construction projects in supposedly empty systems. Energy signatures that matched known technology appeared and disappeared across the galactic rim. Most disturbing of all, the cosmic background radiation in certain sectors was changing, becoming quieter, more organized. It is as if someone is editing the universe, wrote senior analyst Kralin in a report that was classified and buried. Removing noise, adding structure, turning chaos into order on a scale we have never seen. But the most disturbing reports came from the crystal singers, whose crystal bodies were sensitive to vibrations across multiple dimensions. They began to detect something they called the quiet. The universe sings, explained Prime Singer Valinith to anyone who would listen. Every star, every planet, every living thing adds its voice to the great song. But in the sectors near human space, the song is changing. It is becoming organized, directed, as if someone is conducting an orchestra we cannot see. These reports reached Ambassador Thari's desk on a quiet Tuesday morning. The old diplomat read them with growing unease, but dismissed them as the fears of primitive species unused to the vastness of space. That dismissal lasted until Thari received a message on their personal communicator, a message that should have been impossible. The communication channel was one that only existed in Council records. It bypassed all security protocols, all encryption, all safeguards that protected high-ranking officials from unwanted contact. The message appeared directly on Thari's screen, without going through any of the normal networks. The message was simple, written in perfect Council standard. We remember the laughter. Do you remember what you took from us? The signature was unmistakably human. Thari stared at the screen for a long time. Their forearms trembled slightly. This was impossible. Humans did not have the technology to breach Council security systems. Humans were primitive, isolated. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's 10,000-year history. Representatives from every major species had gathered on Nexus Prime, their faces showing emotions ranging from confusion to terror. The great crystal dome, which usually echoed with civilized debate, now buzzed with frightened whispers and urgent conversations. Ambassadors Thari stood at the center of the hall, but they no longer carried themselves with the confident arrogance of 50 years ago. Their forearms shook slightly as they held the data tablets containing the reports that had brought them all here. Fellow council members, Thari began, their voice carrying across the silent hall. We are here to discuss what can only be called a crisis. The humans, whom we classified as a contained species 50 years ago, appear to have developed beyond our expectations. The understatement brought no laughter this time. Everyone in the hall had read the reports. Everyone knew that developed beyond our expectations was like calling a supernova slightly bright. Let me read you the confirmed incidents from the past 6 months, Thari continued, consulting their first tablet. 17 merchant vessels have disappeared in sectors bordering human space. All were traveling through regions marked as empty on our charts. Of the 43 crew members who managed to escape in life pods, 37 have required treatment for severe psychological trauma. The Crystal Singers made a low, mournful note. The ethereal collective dimmed their glow in distress. Even the ancient world mind of Kepler 442b processed the information with visible difficulty, its mechanical voice stuttering as it tried to make sense of the data. The survivors all report similar experiences, Thari went on. Structures in space that should not exist. Technology that violates known physical laws. And humans who appear to have undergone significant modifications. A delegate from the Peaceful Alliance raised one of their flower-like appendages. What kind of modifications? Thari consulted another tablet. According to survivor testimony, the humans they encountered were taller than baseline human specifications. Their movements were too fluid, too precise. Their eyes glowed with an internal light. Most disturbingly, they appeared to communicate through direct mental contact rather than verbal speech. Worried murmurs filled the hall. Mental communication was the privilege of only the most advanced species, races that had evolved beyond the need for vocal cords and sound waves. For humans to develop such abilities in only 50 years was impossible. Furthermore, Thari continued, long-range sensors have detected massive construction projects in over 3,000 star systems. These are all systems that our charts mark as uninhabited. The energy signatures from these projects do not match any known technology in our databases. General Corax of the hegemony rose from his seat, his massive form casting a shadow across the hall. Are you telling us that the humans have expanded into 3,000 systems without us noticing? That appears to be the case, Thari replied reluctantly. Our monitoring systems show no evidence of human ships traveling to these locations. No hyperspace signatures, no engine emissions, no communication traffic. Yet the construction projects are there, and they are clearly artificial. How is that possible? Demanded the Trade Confederation representative. No species can build in 3,000 systems simultaneously without massive supply lines and transportation networks. We do not know, Thari admitted. The technology being used is beyond our current understanding. The hall erupted in concerned chatter. Species that had felt secure in their technological superiority suddenly found themselves facing an unknown that defied all their assumptions about what was possible. There is more, Thari said, and the hall fell silent again. The Crystal Singers have reported anomalies in the cosmic background radiation. Sectors of space near human construction projects are becoming organized. The random noise of the universe is being replaced by structured patterns. Prime Singer Valinith rose gracefully, their crystalline body catching and reflecting the dome's light. The universe has always sung in chaos, they said, their voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Every star, every world, every living thing adds its voice to the great symphony. But in the regions touched by human presence, the chaos is being replaced by harmony. Not natural harmony, but imposed harmony. It is as if someone is rewriting the fundamental laws of physics. The implications of this statement sent waves of fear through the assembled delegates. If humans had developed the ability to manipulate the basic forces of the universe, they had moved far beyond any known level of technological advancement. What do they want? Asked a small voice from the delegation of the aquatic minds. Have they made any demands? Stated any intentions? Thari's expression grew even more troubled. That is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this situation. They have made no demands, sent no ultimatums, made no threats. They simply exist. And wait. Wait for what? Demanded General Corax. We do not know. The silence that followed was broken by a new voice, one that had remained quiet throughout the session. The ethereal collective's representative suddenly blazed brighter, their energy form pulsing with urgent communication. We have been monitoring quantum fluctuations across the galaxy, the being said, their voice like static electricity. For the past 10 years, we have detected signs that someone has been manipulating probability itself. Events that should be random are becoming predictable. Chance encounters are becoming planned meetings. The very fabric of cause and effect is being rewritten. The mathematical impossibility of this statement struck the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Manipulating probability was the stuff of theoretical physics papers, not practical technology. Even the most advanced species could barely detect quantum fluctuations, let alone control them. Are you suggesting, asked the world mind in its mechanical voice, that humans have learned to control luck itself? We are suggesting, the ethereal replied, that luck may no longer exist in sectors where humans operate. Everything that happens there happens because they want it to happen. Before anyone could respond to this terrifying possibility, the lights in the great dome began to dim. The crystal walls, which had stood unchanged for millennia, started to resonate with a low harmonic frequency that made every being in the hall feel uneasy. What is happening? Someone called out. But the question was answered before anyone could reply. The space at the center of the hall began to fold in on itself, reality bending like heated metal. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with energy that made first stand on end and circuits spark with static. When the distortion cleared, a single figure stood in the center of the amphitheater. It was human, but not as any of them remembered humans to be. The being was tall and graceful, with proportions that were somehow more perfect than nature usually allowed. Its skin seemed to glow with an internal light. Its eyes held depths that suggested vast intelligence and even vaster patience. When it spoke, Its words bypassed the delegates' ears entirely, appearing directly in their minds, in whatever language they thought in. "Hello," it said, and the simple greeting carried layers of meaning that made every listener understand they were in the presence of something far beyond their comprehension. We thought it was time we had a conversation. The hall was completely silent. 847 species, many of whom had never agreed on anything, were united in their terror of the impossible being that stood before them. "You seem surprised to see us," the human continued, its mental voice carrying what might have been amusement. "We suppose that is understandable. You did, after all, decide that we were not worth your attention 50 years ago." Ambassador Thari, drawing on centuries of diplomatic training, managed to find their voice. "We welcome this opportunity for dialogue. Perhaps we can discuss." "Discuss what?" the human interrupted. Now its mental voice carried something that might have been curiosity. "Your terms for our membership in your council? Your generous offer to share your technology with us? Your willingness to treat us as equals?" The sarcasm in the being's thoughts was so sharp it made several delegates wince physically. "We remember the laughter," the human said, its gaze sweeping across the assembled representatives. "We remember the votes. We remember being told that we were too young, too primitive, too dangerous to be trusted with galactic civilization. That was 50 years ago," Thari stammered. "Perhaps we could reconsider." 50 years, the human agreed. 50 years of isolation. 50 years of being cut off from your trade networks, your cultural exchanges, your technological sharing. Do you know what we did with those 50 years? The question hung in the air like a challenge. No one dared to answer. "We learned," the human said simply. "We learned that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than any of your species ever imagined. We learned that the limitations you accept as absolute are merely suggestions. We learned that consciousness itself can be expanded, enhanced, and transcended." The being gestured, and suddenly every delegate could see images in their minds, cities that existed in folded space, ships that traveled through dimensions, humans who had merged with quantum circuits. The figure at the center of the great hall paused, its presence filling the chamber not with sound, but with a deep, resonant awareness that touched every mind present. The silence was absolute. Even the most ancient beings, who had spoken in rumbles and harmonic frequencies for millennia, found their voices silenced by the weight of what stood before them. Transcendence, the human being said, the word forming in every mind at once, layered with meaning beyond language. That was our third option. We did not merely advance. We evolved beyond the constraints of biology, of linear time, of isolated consciousness. We became more than a species. We became a principle. A soft hum filled the air, not from the being, but from the very structure of the dome. The crystal walls, which had stood for 10,000 years, began to vibrate in resonance with something unseen, as if the universe itself acknowledged the shift. General Korax, his armored body trembling not from fear, but from the raw instinct of a warrior facing the incomprehensible, growled, "And now? What do you do with this power?" The being turned its gaze toward the general, not with malice, not with anger, but with something far more unsettling, pity. "We do nothing," it said. "Not yet. We have not come to conquer. We have not come to destroy. We have come only to show you what you made." Ambassadors Thari, their limbs shaking, stepped forward. "Then perhaps there is still room for peace, for coexistence. We can offer." "You offer nothing," the being interrupted, not harshly, but with the quiet finality of a truth long overdue. "You cannot offer what you no longer possess. Sovereignty? You lost the right to define it when you decided that only your form of evolution mattered. Technology? You withheld it from us, believing a gift. But we have rewritten the laws it was built upon. Membership in your council? You speak of inclusion as if it is a privilege you grant. But the galaxy is no longer yours to govern." Starry's voice cracked. "Then what do we do?" The being looked across the hall, not at individuals, but at the collective, a civilization frozen in its own arrogance, now facing the end of its era. "You learn," it said, "just as we did. You adapt, or you fade." A murmur, soft and desperate, spread through the delegates. "But how?" asked the representative of the Unity Collective, their shared mind trembling. We are not like you. We did not have 50 years of isolation to become this. No, the being agreed. You had 10,000 years of comfort, 10,000 years of believing you were the pinnacle. That is your burden. Ours was survival. Yours is awakening. The ethereal collective pulsed with a dim, uncertain light. And if we refuse, if we fight, the being did not answer with words. Instead, the dome's ceiling changed. The stars above Nexus Prime, stars that had been mapped, named, and studied for millennia, shifted, not in position, in nature. One by one, distant suns began to pulse in a rhythm that matched no known astronomical phenomenon. The patterns were deliberate, mathematical, alive, and as the delegates watched, a new constellation formed in the void, a perfect, glowing image of Earth, a message written in light across the cosmos. We could erase your networks, the being said calmly, unravel your economies, silence your ships. We could fold your worlds into dimensions where time does not flow. But we will not. Not because we cannot, because we choose not to. It stepped forward, and reality bent gently around it, like water parting for a stone. We are not your judges. We are your consequences. Then, softer, and perhaps, if you're willing to change your future, the being raised a hand, not in threat, not in command, but in offering. We will not rule the galaxy. We will not demand worship or submission, but we will no longer be excluded. From this moment, the old order ends. The age of hierarchy is over. The age of evolution has begun. It looked at Thari one final time. You asked if we should be allowed to join your alliance. A pause. The question was never whether we were ready for you. Another beat. It was whether you were ready for us. And with that, the being stepped back. Space folded. Reality snapped shut. The figure was gone. But the silence it left behind was louder than any explosion, any declaration of war, any decree of power. The great crystal dome stood still. The delegates remained frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. The Galactic Council had spent 10,000 years deciding who belonged in the galaxy. Now, for the first time, they had to ask, do we? In the decades that followed, the galaxy changed, not by war, not by conquest, but by quiet transformation. Humanity did not take over. They did not enslave or destroy. They simply existed in thousands of systems, in folded dimensions, in the fabric of reality itself. And slowly, species began to understand. The crystal singers stopped singing in chaos and began harmonizing with the new order. The Trade Confederation collapsed, not from force, but from irrelevance. When distance could be folded and matter reshaped, commerce based on scarcity meant nothing. The hegemony disbanded its fleets. No war could be fought when the enemy could erase the battlefield with a thought. And ambassadors, Thari, they resigned. On their last day, they stood at the edge of human space, staring at a star system that pulsed with quiet, intelligent light. A single message appeared on their screen. We remember the laughter, but we choose to remember something else. The beginning. Thari closed their eyes. And for the first time in 3 centuries, they wept. The galaxy moved forward, not as it had before, but as it always should have. The end.